And thank you very much for joining us on the Modern Job Search Checklist. This is Mark Anthony Dyson. Just call me Mark. Make it real simple. Next to me is my co host, uh, Damian Birkel. And if you don't know Damien, you should get to know him, but follow his profile on LinkedIn for sure. He has helped more, well, his organization and him has helped more than 10,000 folks find jobs. And he's also a two times author, and he's been doing this game since 1992. Damien, how are you?
I am fine. Thank you.
Good. Good.
Excited to be here today.
Yes, I am too. And next week, I'm going to try to find a way to pipe music into our intro. Uh, Give it a little bit more pizzazz, if you will. But for this week, we're stuck with nothing. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and we're going to talk about avoiding job search traps, not particularly scams, but things that are often induced by people's own aspirations and sometimes lack of motivation. So they're real short and simple. We want you in the chat to join us and chime in with tips and advice if you're qualified or if you're experienced, or perhaps you could share your experiences or let us know what kind of advice you need. We'll be glad to interrupt to what we're talking about to talk about what you want to talk about. So thank you very much again for joining us. We stream every week to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and now Twitter. So if you catch up to my profile on Twitter, you'll be able to follow the show if you don't want to watch it on any other platforms. In the meantime, let's go ahead and begin. Um, we are thinking about how people are underestimating how layered the job process is these days, right? Some people are having anywhere from 8 to 14 interviews. We know that people are going through different vetting system that they ever had been a part of. We also know that people are also disqualifying themselves before they actually are in the race to get a job. Now, there's about 10.1 million jobs that are available right now. That's a lot of jobs, and that's more than what we had at 9.3 back in July. So, what do you think, Damien? Are people really underestimating, you think, or are you seeing people underestimating how difficult the job market is, even though there appears to be lots of jobs?
Yes, and it really is stratified in terms of the difficulty. And what I mean
Hmm.
by that is you have service industries, hotels, and restaurants crying for help. There was a restaurant rather, that was on the news because they couldn't open because they couldn't find enough people to provide service in their
Hmm.
new restaurant. But as you kind of go up and out, and your career is more complex, if you lose your job, it is not like the old days. And it is a multi step process, and it can be a long process just to land a job. And it really
Hmm.
has nothing to do with you and everything to do with how some companies are recruiting people today.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think that people are not realizing that uh, just because the job is available and that you want the job means it's going to automatically be yours because there's lots. Still, 10.1 million jobs are available. They should understand a little bit of the history as well, because we know the last Great Recession, there was a time where jobs were scarce, and there were more job seekers that were available to apply to jobs than there were jobs, and still, they somehow a lot of companies managed to slow down the process whenever they're not sure what to do, because that's what they're doing now. People are taking 8 to 14 interviews, 3 to 6 months for to get a job finalized if you're the right candidate. That's an awful long time, but yet people have hired good candidates on shorter leashes and less available candidates. So, very often I think companies are providing an opportunity for gamemanship on both ends. When their behavior changes, so does a job seeker, and sometimes job seekers don't become shrewd like the companies are, and that's often what I've been saying lately is that become more shrewd in your approach with companies. Uh, Try to get more than one interview, which you should do anyway. But if the process is taking 3 to 6 months, if you have 4 to 5 interviews that you're interchangeable, you're really not all that busy other than researching deeper into the company, finding more people to get more information about. And then you can disqualify companies if you know their behavior is not what their values represent, if you know what I mean.
I do. And uh, Rosalinda talks about age. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Forgive me. Uh, it's not only stratified, but I think
Mm-hmm.
if you could really see the market, you would see a mismatch in terms
Mm-hmm.
of talent versus opportunities. And the 10
Yeah.
million jobs creates this illusion that there is an army of people that are sitting home on the couch, drinking beer, watching soap operas. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's the case. Uh, I think that there are a boatload of jobs out there, but I also
Mm-hmm.
think that there are a ton of people that, for a number of very good reasons, don't qualify for those jobs. And if
Yeah.
you could subtract that from the market, meaning of the 10,000 jobs, only 10% of the jobs are available to folks that are in certain areas of expertise, that's a little
Mm-hmm.
more realistic. Because what I'm getting is a lot of pushback from members of professionals in transition
Mm-hmm.
because they are getting flack from family and friends who are basically saying, it's a wide open market. What's wrong with you? Why can't you get a job? And it becomes very stressful very quickly because, in addition to everything you have to go through, you now get this added layer of unneeded luggage that
Mm-hmm.
makes your self esteem even worse. And as Rosalind said, I think I have it right this time,
Mm-hmm.
age really is a factor. And
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And um, those that are 50 plus have to take that into consideration. And what I say to those members that are 50 plus, if you get a job interview, rejoice and assume that they already know your age. And there are savvy 50 plus job searchers, which are in the minority. And then you have everybody else that I see really struggling to become more contemporary, to update their outfits, but even
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, to update their skills. So this all goes back to what I was saying about the job market being stratified.
Yeah. There's a recent article I read, and I believe it was it was AARP, in which they talked about the jobs that 50 plus are getting. And it's not very encouraging to me, especially if you have loads of experience, you've been in the C-suite, or you've had high-level professional jobs like directorships and senior manager jobs. Once you are you have to leave or you've been forced out from company, then it becomes much harder to get that kind of job again in many cases. In some cases, yes. And we know a lot of times it's about presentation, large in part, when someone older is presenting themselves. But very often, when they're not able to adequately present themselves, they're getting jobs like baristas, they're
Yes.
getting jobs like in retail.
Hmm.
They may get some teacher jobs, but they're not in areas that they want to get them in, uh, and it becomes a very tough climb. One of the smarter things that people often can do if you're 50 plus is that you've got to start building relationships, not with just in the big companies where you think you can make an impact. I really recommend you starting with some of the smaller startups.
Yes.
Startups are much more, you could talk to an actual hiring manager. He might be the same guy that's leading the company and might be doing the design, but he's leading the company and you can talk to them. And you might be able to, you have to start that way from the bottom as far as size, and not particularly as far as the a smaller size, not particularly larger and what's considered a little bit more prestige. But yeah, those are very difficult to navigate, and I can't say that I'm an expert on navigating that area. I've seen people go through and get jobs that are similar to what they have once they were ousted, if they had like management type jobs and leadership type of jobs. But those leaders and managers were also very savvy in the way that they were also, a lot of them created content in the respect that they were the ones writing the articles, they were doing the researches, they were doing a lot of other things outside the realm of just telling people what to do and managing difficult HR situations. So it's more or less these days you have to kind of think how you can make yourself valuable to a company to where you can't be fired. But all having said that, and I shouldn't use the word fired because a lot of people aren't fired if they're laid off and they're not able to get back on track in that kind of way. And there's different situations. It's hard, because average person does judge someone who's older harshly,
Hmm.
in that sense, if they're not educated about the job market and especially about someone's industries, because some industries are a whole lot different than others. There's some industries that embrace older workers. There are some countries and cultures that embrace older workers. I would say uh, Asian cultures are much better at embracing older workers than Americans are. Americans, and to me, is probably one of the worst in that particular way. But it depends on the industry and depends on a lot of factors. So I'm not willing to paint a broad, sweeping brush, um, to say that the job market should be this. But age is a factor many times.
And in that group, that age group, actually a little bit higher, like in their late 50s or
Hmm.
early 60s, they are geographically bound to the area by choice. And
Hmm.
so if there's an opportunity that is similar to the job that they did, excuse me, many times they're not willing to pay the cost of packing
Hmm.
up and moving to another city. And so what I see is kind of stepping back, and instead of having one big job, concentrate on building multiple channels of income, with the thought that if something happens to one, I still have number two and number three coming in, because ultimately I am responsible for income coming into the household. And if I have multiple channels coming in, then it
Hmm.
is much more predictable than, throwing myself into one position that may or may not be very volatile, a year or two in.
Yeah.
The other thought that I had is many, many startups love older workers because of their experience.
Damien froze up for a moment.
Okay. Um, and utilizing their your
Uh,
experience.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you I love the picture, but yeah, go ahead. You were saying about the many startups.
Right. And with an entrepreneur that's starting, especially at a business incubator, um,
Hmm.
they love your experience, and it gets you out of the house. It gets you into a young and vibrant atmosphere,
Hmm.
and you can make a huge um, influence on the company with your experience. Now, are you going to get paid a lot of money? Who knows? You could
Hmm.
get a lot of stock in exchange for your expertise. But again, utilizing your experience in different ways when you are out of work is a good thing, not a bad thing, because not only are you helping people, but you're meeting people. And if you're meeting people, you're networking with people. And as you and I always say, 80%, and now it's probably 90% of all jobs come through networking. So the stronger and bigger your network is, the more effective your job search is going to be long term.
Absolutely. I think we can move on, but I think we'll end up back here in a little bit because of what's coming up. But I think, yeah, people tend to make it themselves. You don't want to make it harder for yourself than it actually is. But you don't want to give up, which I think a lot of people do. People give up before they start because they look at numbers and they tend to focus on what other people are telling them as far as the doom and gloom when it may not be that way for them. You have to really be tunnel vision, single minded, focused in that kind of way to kind of make yourself the best candidate possible. And remember that you are still competing for jobs. Um, Having a lot of people, a lot of jobs open, um, you know, it could be it may not be as easy as you think, and of course we'll find out more information as time goes on. Let's talk a little bit about professional development. And I think one of the things that we've been saying over the pandemic, me and you and a lot of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of other folks have said, do professional development and this and other. But I think people kind of have to understand the differences and understand what you get with free a payment. I mean, free training, like getting the YouTube and the podcast and what have you. Those are good, and that's a good place to start. But then there are some that are paid, and you have to kind of even pay attention to what you're getting for under the paid model.
Mm-hmm.
um, there are some organizations, like if you're in human resources and you're paying for a SHRM course, you're going to get credit for that course. Or you're paying for some other outside courses that are not SHRM and human resources. There are some people that provide a paid accreditation model. My friend Jim Peacock does things for the National Career Development Association. But he's an accredited teacher. He used to be in
Ah,
leadership in that organization. So there's a difference there, as opposed to if I do it or if you do it, the only credit you get is the receipt you get when you pay for the course. But having said that, though, I think people have to kind of understand the mileage they're going to get out of free, which means you're going to have to manufacture opportunities and create some assurances for yourself, as opposed to a paid model. There's at least a higher credibility rate, in being that you're getting somebody who is accredited by an organization. So I think that might be something, and people are overthinking, but they're also under they're underthinking as well. as far as what they're getting and what are the opportunities this training will provide. Even with, we can talk about college and master's degrees, but I think there's a whole thing that we should visit at this particular point as far as what people should expect.
Agreed. Um, One very, very helpful site to help people with their skills, believe it or not, is Microsoft.
Hmm.
Microsoft has a ton of courses that you can take that can turn you into an Excel power user or a
Hmm.
Word power user, and that is a strong differentiator on your resume. Again, depending
Hmm.
on where you're going next. And there's no charge for that, of course. And there are other uh, free courses out there like Harvard and Cambridge
Hmm.
University and others, which again are very helpful. And one that I pay for and get tremendous use out of is the step up LinkedIn level,
Hmm.
because of not only the benefits of what you can do in terms of who you can contact and connections you can make, which can enable your uh, community, your LinkedIn community, your personal community to become more robust much quicker because you have access to virtually everybody in LinkedIn. But they brought in and merged lynda.com, and there are boatloads of courses, more courses than anybody could take. And there are certificates available too. My point being is people don't have very much discretionary funding
Right.
when you're out of work. And I'm very sensitive to that.
Hmm.
Um, and in my opinion, if there were one thing that I would do, it would be LinkedIn, just because, again, how it really pumps up your your contacts, and it's month to month. So I believe you get a month's trial free, and you go from there. And I'm not getting any from LinkedIn. I'm just telling you uh, my experience. And another benefit of taking courses is there is a spot on LinkedIn at the very bottom where you can add in certificates.
Hmm.
And if someone goes to your LinkedIn profile and goes down and looks at your certificates and sees 2020, 2021, that indicates to them that you continue to self educate and that you take responsibility for your career, and you're moving forward all the time without a lot of direction, but you're going in the right you're in the right channel because they can tell just by looking at the classes you've taken.
Right. Yeah, that's great points. And I think now, I think LinkedIn is offering like a 2 for 1 month, or at some point they were.
Hmm.
So you could pay for, you pay for 1 month, it'll give you 2 months. And then I think you access, if I'm not mistaken, you do access their LinkedIn learning for as much as you want. So
Mhm.
in that way, LinkedIn right now might be a great value where you can get a couple of $100 of free classes in addition to add on to your membership, and that way might provide you some greater value in that way. I think one of the things that we talk about when they first did those college classes, I don't know if they do it now, like when Harvard and Cambridge, I think UMass was a part, Stanford was doing something. They had a whole bunch of classes. The one thing I did notice at that particular time I was looking is that they put their old classes out there online. I
Uh,
thought, I don't know if they do that right now, but I noticed that the dates were several years back, and they provided for free. But it could be debatable how useful, how relevant those classes are, depending upon what industry you're in. And that's why I say you've got to look and really be thoughtful about the relevancy of what you're taking, if it's free versus whether it's paid. And even paid, you should be looking at, okay, who used the class, who got jobs off of it. You want to talk to those people, and you want to kind of do your research that way. Everything has to be vetted this day, even your free classes or even something that you pay for, even if it's going to be accredited, because
Mhm.
everybody have different standards of accreditation. You don't want to take it for granted that just because it's a credit is going to be relevant to where you're going. You might have the experience already, and you're just taking the get the credit for optics, not because it's going to be the most useful for you. So there's a whole discovery aspect of it, and I think that people, even though we're giving and we've given it by saying, "Hey, start somewhere," free is just a start.
Right.
It is not the end all and be all
Be
to
all.
everything,
Mhm.
and you have to be really thoughtful and careful and talk to people about how that works for them, for those who have taken it.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yep. If you don't have anything to add on to that, we can move on to the next one. Uh, we could talk ad nauseum about this because we talk a lot about interviewing, but um, you know, yeah, people still don't practice interviewing. And this is not just for people who might be considered rank and file, so to speak, or just a regular employee. We noticed that throughout the pandemic that there are people who have years of leadership experience doing things that they shouldn't do. And this is where we get into whether interview preparation is perceived as something that is not necessary, when it is probably, out of anything in your job search, whether you're employed or not employed, if you want to be successful in your job search, there has to be some kind of preparation. But I think people undervalue the fact that that interview preparation helps people prepare for their next opportunity, no matter what type of what type of position that you're going for.
I agree. Uh, when you walk into an interview and you are clearly not prepared, you stick out like a sore thumb.
Hmm.
Remember, one of the most critical things in an interview is to establish rapport with all of the people you interview. Because if I like you, because hiring is a very emotional uh, process, even with all the tools, even with AI, even
Hmm.
with applicant tracking systems, still comes down to if I like you, I may hire you. And if I
Hmm.
don't, I won't. And if you're not going in there, uh, all pistons firing
Right.
and concentrating on listening, actively listening, and
Hmm.
responding with answers that are crisp and to the point instead of blabbering all over the place,
Right.
again, it's going to show because you have a very limited amount of time to make a very strong impression. So, bottom line, Mark, I agree with you. One of the single most important things that you can do to help you land a job is practice, practice, practice interviewing.
Yeah, yeah. And people take it for granted because most people have never ever practiced interviewing. They were able to talk themselves into interviewing, and that's a combination of things. It could be a combination of somebody you get who is not experienced interviewing other people, so they don't know what to look for. But if you're able to create an engaging conversation, which that's a big part of it, you might be able to get by. But there's all kind of circumstances that we can talk about. But I think the whole idea that people underestimate preparing. They even more underestimate the idea of the post interview follow up. I mean, there's so many people who walk away from interviews that don't ever talk to the company again and don't try to be in front of them. They either go to one of two extremes. They either go too far by calling the office every day, am I hired yet? Am I hired yet? Am I hired yet? Or they go the other direction and saying, you know, whatever, that should have been good enough for them to hire me. I mean, and there are some people who get it in between, but all of that, they underestimate. You shouldn't underestimate any part of the interview process. You know, you have to also do some research for the interview, right? You know, you have to, you know, you should be interviewing or researching the interviewer even. But I think there's so much of this will take people underestimate and they undervalue all of those principles that we talk about ad nauseum, that really, you know, at this particular point it should be shame on you if you don't do any of those things.
And you really risk offending a hiring manager. Example, a college graduate, recent graduate, uh, did a so-so job in terms of research. Now, here's where things went south. He failed to read the company news releases, which is
Hmm.
critical because that's corporate speak. That's how they want their employees, their investors, uh, the general public, and of course, Wall Street as a whole to view them. Well, it turns out that there was a product that had been released with great fanfare 6 months earlier. And this
Hmm.
was a news release talking about the product being recalled. And there were a lot of very upset people in the building. And this
Hmm.
guy had not completed his research. And he went in and he started talking about the value of this product and blah, 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 blah. And the person looked at him and said, sorry, interview over,
Yeah.
because he wasn't
Yeah.
prepared.
Yeah, I actually knew someone, and one of the reasons why they came to me and realized it needs them. This is some years ago when
Mm-hmm.
I was doing one-on-one coaching. But anyway, he went to interview with a company for a product that was actually popular, but the product was also recalled
Oh,
that very day,
oh,
the same day. And here he is talking about how how he can really uh, sell this product and market this product, and it's like didn't mention at all that the recall happened. So he could have positioned himself, say, "Hey, I know how to fix that problem right away. That could help." Didn't mention it at all. Totally tone deaf to the issue. And the funny thing is, I think the manager actually played with him
oh
because
no.
the manager didn't tell him the product was recalled. He wanted to hear what that person was going to say. And so he let him go, all that. But they got the call later, and the guy made the connection later. So, oh my goodness. So I didn't know the product was recalled. Said, you didn't fix their problem and you missed the grand opportunity to fix the problem. And because you didn't, you know, they dismissed you. You weren't even, that was entertainment for them, so to speak. And all that to say that, yeah, you could be quite entertaining too if you're not preparing to interview.
Absolutely. And another thing for people being interviewed to keep in mind is many times companies have a list of questions that everybody asks you as you go
Hmm.
through the interview or even a panel interview. And if you're, I don't want to say that people make things up as they go along,
Hmm.
but if they make things up as they go along, they're across a number of people, their answers won't necessarily be consistent.
Hmm.
And when we would make a hiring decision, we would all take our score sheet and we would all get together and average them. And then we would start talking about the person because we were in a defined framework and
Hmm.
we had our impressions, but it was within that framework that we made our decision. Point being,
Hmm.
going back to being prepared and
Hmm.
find the top 100 most difficult questions and answers and be
Hmm.
prepared. That's what I used to do. And I go into an interview feeling relaxed, knowing that they could ask me whatever they wanted that were difficult. And I had taken the time to go through and craft a short answer. And again, that marries back to what we were saying about preparation and
Hmm.
having a feel for the pulse of the company.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea, the fact that also, and this is a big one too, is the follow up, is following up after interviews. And by the way, that's following up after each interview. That's not just following up at the end as well, because companies are going to take longer than they should have. And after for most people, they know that they should kind of assure the date of when they should hear from the company about the next steps. And if they don't hear, well, first you should ask what are the next steps, and then is there a date I should wait for to hear by? If I don't hear by this date, when can I call to follow up? And they'll gladly tell you when you can do so. A lot of people don't ask that question. Still, there's a lot of people who don't even send the thank you note after, which I know there are some recruiters who say don't send me thank you notes. I get why they say, because they don't be bothered, but you know, people have to be remembered in some kind of way. But I think for most people, they expect a thank you note, and the one that gets the thank you note is often the one that's going to remember and get. In statistics show that they to get forwarded to the next round. But I think people just you'll have to be more cognizant about following up on a regular basis. Sometimes it might be every 2 weeks if it's been more than 2 weeks after, and sometimes it might be every week, especially if they say that they're looking to make a decision soon. So you have to kind of listen to what's being said and then follow up accordingly. You be sure that you'll send a thank you note. You could even send them a note, an article maybe, or something that
Mm-hmm.
you've seen that might remind them of the discussion that you had, and see what maybe their competitors are doing, what or other people are doing in their industry. Or maybe there's a list I mentioned before. Send a list of 20-25 ways you can add value to the company outside of what you talked about in the interview, and you'll definitely be remembered. I know people who have used that strategy and it's worked really well. So, uh, you've got to think of some ways outside the box as to being remembered by the hiring managers or people who are doing the hiring. How you can add value. There should be some constant reminders until they say no.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing I'd like to add, and that is sending a letter that matches your abilities to the employer's needs. And very quickly it says, dear so and so, I really enjoyed our discussion.
Hmm.
We talked about many things, and I want to take a brief opportunity to review how I am the answer to your needs. And one
Hmm.
column says your requirements, and that's the requirements of the job. And the other half
Hmm.
says my abilities, and you mash them up bullet point by bullet point. And I can guarantee you that you are the only one that's going to take the time to do that. And like you said, Mark, it is a huge differentiator and it is firepower for the hiring manager to go to bat for you if there's another competitive candidate and kind of go, yeah, but take a look at this, and perhaps we need to talk about this person again, because you
Hmm.
have simply taken the time to align your abilities with the needs of the position. And the people that have used it in professionals in transition have mentioned that they've gotten spectacular results in terms of hiring managers being blown away by going
Hmm.
that extra step.
Yeah. I always say, in simpler terms, be the prescription to the employer's job description.
I like
That
that.
just makes it just make it really easy. You have to kind of know what the needs are for you to meet those needs. That's got to be a bigger part of your agenda than anything else. And if you're not finding solutions, you're not having solution oriented discussions in the interviews, and then follow up with continual solutions after that, you're kind of missing opportunities to stand out and be memorable, because people remember solutions. They just do. We don't know, and people want to get down to it overall. Did you want to add anything else to that part of that discussion at this particular time, Damien? We can always
We're
come
good.
back to it. Okay. All right. And I think that goes along with people thinking that their talent is enough. Uh, it's interesting to me. People will talk about how great they are. They're willing to even, and we can even talk. Let's merge part of that discussion here too. Um, I've been hearing a lot about people talk about promoting and bragging about yourself, and I agree with people fundamentally that, yeah, you've got to promote yourself. If you don't, nobody else will. I get that point. But I think too, there's an egregious part of this that makes it sour for anybody else who's hearing you, and including people who might be making a decision. Is this: if you don't have proof to your bragging, then belief in yourself is not going to be ultimately enough. If you don't show some kind of social proof, whether it's through recommendations and it's through, people saying good things about your work, if somebody or a peer saying, I love the way that you coach, I like your philosophies, I love the stories you tell, and all those kind of things, there is validation, and you're kind of asking for it when you do brag about yourself, because you're hoping to get validated by somebody buying your product or hiring you and all that. But I think ultimately people run into a wall, because I've seen people promote themselves but to no avail for years on end, and they make no there's no value to it because there's no proof of all the things that you say.
I agree. And the other thing is, someone, this is bouncing off of what you said, Mark.
Hmm.
Other people talking about your talent is 5 times more effective.
Yep.
Uh, you read some of these things on LinkedIn, contrived reasons to post about how good you are. Uh,
Hmm.
and my immediate reaction is usually, eh, and I
Yeah.
just go on to the next one.
Hmm.
Um, let your accomplishments speak for themselves. There is nothing wrong with promoting yourself, but it's all in how you do it,
Hmm.
when you do it, and the way that you do it.
Hmm.
And most importantly, the language that you use.
Yes.
Because, if you say, I increased sales by $17,000 uh, in 3 months, well, okay, but was it just you? I mean, is it more accurate to say that you were part of a team that, um,
Hmm.
et cetera? So my point is, if you come on as if you are the conquering hero and the best thing since sliced bread, You may feel good about yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but other people may react by saying, you know, he's full of crap. There's just no way he could have done this by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up undermining yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you have kind of an even tone, a quiet confidence, a willingness to recognize people that have helped you attain an accomplishment. So um, promoting and bragging about yourself, um, I think, is a little bit different. Promoting
Mm-hmm.
is when you are saying, here are some of the things that have been accomplished
Mm-hmm.
with a team or because of. Bragging is, well, here's another way. Promoting is basically when you're saying you to the people that's reading it.
Right.
Bragging is when you're saying I. And to me, that always falls on deaf ears. And
Mm-hmm.
by the way, I think is also tone deaf.
Right.
So those are all things to consider. But the bottom line to this whole thing is when you're writing your resumes, you need to promote yourself and you
Right.
do need to develop problem action result statements. And that's another conversation.
Yeah.
So, again, two different things. I think promoting yourself is different than bragging about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And either one could be a clanging symbol, if you will, if
Yes.
you're not doing it in a way that people can wrap their arms around it. I mean, especially if you're writing a post. In my opinion, when people write posts about that they've done X, Y, and Z, I would say even it helps to include other people who can vouch for you when it's something that was seeable and that was visible and that people know exists, or the person that you helped, tag them and they can chime in. Yes, this was fantastic. Then it becomes promotion, but
Hmm.
it becomes bragging if you're the only one that witnesses it. And I just find it interesting. You brought up a great point. Bragging does it leaves a sour taste in your mouth when there's nobody else that can First of all, if it doesn't resonate with anybody, you are kind of you're clanging your own symbol. Because it's just noise. It's just, that I did all these things and nobody can relate to it. Now, if there are people that you've helped, that I found these solutions, these are the ways I did it, and that you've tagged a couple of people who benefit from it, then they could come and say, hey, yeah, thank you. It saved my life, or it saved me a bunch of time, it saved me a bunch of money, or whatever it may be. But I think people just need to be more, I think people should promote themselves more, but I think they need to be more thoughtful about the way that they promote themselves. I think that to a certain degree, if there's bragging and if it's a fact and you can prove it, there's nothing bragging except when you tell us the same brag over and over and over again, and then that's why I'm like, oh, okay, we get it. It's the same thing. But I notice that times in an all, and I'm saying just LinkedIn, I'm talking about probably on all the platforms, that they'll brag about the same thing for years. And then 3 years later, you're bragging about something. And I was like, I'm no longer impressed now because you haven't evolved or haven't shown us you evolved, and you're relying on the same brag, especially if it's often. Now, if it was something 3 years you said 3 years ago, okay, that might be a little bit different. You're just reminding people this is what I did. Here's the proof to it, and that's it. But I think everybody has a different tolerance level, and by no means I don't want to put it out there that there's just one rule way to
Hmm.
do it, but I
Hmm.
think there's a way to do it so that there's resonation, and there's also people can vouch for you, because that automatically 10 times your efforts in bragging about yourself. So really, people could just go to that person and say, well, how do they help you further? And then they'll want to buy your services or hire you or whatever the case may be. But I think it is, you know, it's overrated when it's just noise.
I agree. And another thing that just drives me bananas is when people exaggerate their accomplishments.
Yes, yes, yes. My head hurts now. Go ahead.
And you know that they're exaggerating. And
Hmm.
to me, it's just a huge turn off. I mean, like when you have a say a segment like we're doing now,
Hmm.
and the person says, "Oh man, we had 50 people," uh, but you look you look at the screen and there's 4 people,
Right.
and it's like, why are you doing this? Because
Hmm.
when you exaggerate, that calls everything else into account about what they've said in the past.
Yeah.
So, did they really do this, or
Hmm.
is it a fib, or is it something that's wildly exaggerated? And if you're uh, exaggerating to a tremendous degree and really
Hmm.
can't prove it and get caught, then it's very embarrassing. And your good reputation takes a huge dive, because now people going forward are going to have a hard time believing what you were telling them,
Hmm.
especially if you're trying to sell them something, whatever that
Yeah.
may be.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. And just the last thing about bragging about yourself is that um, we got recommendations on LinkedIn. And there's nothing wrong with highlighting those recommendations when people brag about you. I know you can't get everybody to write a recommendation, and sometimes it's quite hard to get people to recommend you.
Hmm.
And all because first thing they'll say, well, they don't know what to say, and that might be true, and that might be a clue in some ways because maybe you didn't help them as much as you think you did. And you know what? You should be able to live with that. You should be able to live with that. So therefore, I think people manufacture things because they can't live with the fact that nobody's not saying a whole lot about them. But ask each person that you helped and that you served as could you and help them along by asking them, hey, did you benefited from these three things that I did for you. Do you mind sharing that on my recommendations? That really helps. And that makes it credible, like on LinkedIn, especially because LinkedIn, only real people who are real users are going to be able to access that feature on your LinkedIn profile. So it's not much unless it's a made up person. And I know that people have done that, but I think that people have that opportunity to showcase that whenever they get a chance. And you should try to keep that updated. You should have a few of them a year. And, try not to brag on something you did 5, 6, 7 years ago. That doesn't it may no longer resonate for a lot of different reasons, but try to make those recommendations more relevant. Didn't hear much from the chat today, Damien. We do thank Rosalinda for giving us a couple of compliments, and she appreciated what we talked about today. Do you have anything coming up in the near future we should be looking out for?
I have started on an extremely interesting project with
Hmm.
a zealot who is based in Florida, and we are
Hmm.
trying to put together a national list of every support group in America.
Oh, wow. Okay. Good deal. Okay, that would be interesting to hear about that when you go forward with that. I know that there are some. I think there's a couple of lists that Jacob share. does at Share Media. He has a
Okay.
list, I think, of live streams. I know for sure we're on that list of live streams that people can get job search and career information from. And there's some other, I think he even has something on job clubs as well. So I think that would be um, something that people can look into. I think there's all kinds of lists, and I think people have asked about it from time to time. So you might want to check into that, and maybe you can expand upon that one that people have. I think the question might be whether how updated these lists are. Um, the one that Jacob does, I know he updates his from time to time. I don't know about the other ones, so there's a few out there, and that's probably happening. So that's good. That'll be very interesting. Give people a chance to attend. Although a lot of people are virtual and can
Hmm.
attend one in any from anywhere in any country they want. I know my job lab that I have for my mailing list is exclusive to my mailing list. We're meeting tomorrow, and that's the last one for the summer. I do them during the summer. Um, and then I'll be doing some things in the on the Facebook page during the rest of the year. I know different people have different ways to connect with their audience and for job club. So there's a bunch of folks that are out there, but I think people, since a lot of them are virtual, they can attend, just find one that they like and attend that one, where
Hmm.
they're getting the most help. Um, I've got uh, I've got the shows, of course, Job Seeker Nation coming up next Wednesday. I've got a couple of podcasts that I'm going to be a part of here in the near future,
Great.
and working on a couple of projects. I got a new project. I don't know if I'll call it an ebook, but I've got another project that I'm working on. It's a slower one. It's not like the other ones in the past. Um, I will probably be printing some kind of year end thing of job tips. Not exactly sure, still debating what it's going to be called, but everybody knows about my 421 modern
Hmm.
job tips
Hmm.
for 2021. That may look a little bit different this year. I might be just doing like 100 for 102 for 2022, instead of making a large volume because it makes it hard to download as these things get larger. So
Hmm.
I might just release it separately and just for the year. So we'll see how that goes. Um, but in the future, there are some other ebooks that I'm planning to write, and I've got to revise a bunch of them that I have in my slot. So, got a lot of work to do. In the meantime, since nobody else has anything to say in the chat, we thank you very much for joining us here at the Modern Job Search Checklist. We're here every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Central. Join us next Friday as we present another topic. We will probably have a guest. I've got to confirm that. But enjoy your weekend. Try to stay cool. Try to stay out of the heat. For a lot of us, the humidity is killing us,
Oh yeah.
especially here in Chicago. So stay cool and be good to yourself. Peace in the valley of love. We'll look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.
Amen. Thank you, Mark.